Hey there, also Communications. Welcome back to another review, this time of one of my all-time favorite films, a film that I love with all of my heart, and that is A Nightmare on Elm Street. And yeah, so this is going to be an in-depth review, folks. This is going to be a review slash retrospective. So, because this is a film that's very near and dear to my heart. This is one of my favorite horror films, one of my favorite Wes Craven movies, my favorite film in the franchise, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I mean, I like the sequels. I like Nightmare 3 and 4, but I didn't grow up with them like I did with this one. This is the one of the first horror films I ever saw on television. Now, I don't know if I saw it all the way through, but I have a lot of very vivid memories that are associated with this film from seeing it at a young age. So that might be part of it, why I like the film so much, but also its impact on the genre of the slasher, on the slasher genre, or the horror, and the horror genre as a whole is enormous. And the fact that this film, even now in 2015, still feels very fresh with its concept and with its ideas is something that really stands out to me. Anyway, before I get into the actual review, my thoughts on the film, I'm going to show you guys the different formats of the film that I own, and then I'm going to give you guys a little bit of the backstory on making of the film, because I think the film, it's really fast. It's a really fascinating backstory. There are things about it that I never even knew that were there. I mean, I never even knew certain bits of trivia and certain bits of behind-the-scenes stories about A Nightmare on Elm Street, especially the fact that it was a film that almost didn't get made. And so I really want to talk about that. Anyway, so the copy of Nightmare on Elm Street I'm holding right here is not the original media release. I mean, I had the original media release, but I just ultimately, when I got the Blu-ray set, I decided to get rid of it. Maybe I should have kept it. I don't know. I can find it down the road later sometime. But I kept this because I really like this set. This is a set from Anchor Bay, Elite, and Media Home Entertainment, New Line Cinema Video Treasures. And I really like it because it's a two tape set. And I remember getting this at, like, I think it was like a Goodwill or something, or Value Village, or one of those places. And pretty much has a lot of the same features on the Laserdisc, which I also have. But I always like these sets from Anchor Bay because they open up like this. I mean, there's not that many VHS tapes that look like that, really, to be honest. And I agree with Wes right there, where he says, I really feel that this will be a landmark film for me, a watershed movie. It's not an ordinary run-of-the-mill film. It isn't. It really isn't. Um, so it has two tapes. The tape one includes the original film, and with trailers and television spots at the end. Tape 2 includes deleted and alternate scenes, alternate takes and endings, work print excerpts, FX tests. So yeah, it's Nightmare on Elm Street, the collector's edition VHS, Anchor Bay. And then I also have the DVD that came with the Nightmare on Elm Street box set, the DVD set, the Nightmare series, which also includes the Nightmare series encyclopedia. I'm keeping it because it's just, you know, I like A Nightmare on Elm Street, so I decided this is my favorite, really honestly my favorite horror franchise. So I decided I'm just going to keep all the different formats. Plus the Nightmare series box set's actually really cool looking. Then I also have it on Blu-ray, Nightmare on Elm Street collection. So, and I had it separately on its own on Blu-ray, but I decided to give that to a good friend of mine because I got this set for really cheap. I was at buybacks. This guy was selling stuff, and I got this set for like $10, which is a hell of a good deal at the time. Still a good deal. And that has the first film right there, Nightmare on Elm Street. So, I watched the film again on the Blu-ray. It looked great. I also watched the features, which are good as well, which I'll talk about this briefly later on. And then this, which is really cool. This is a Nightmare on Elm Street, the Special Collector's Edition Laserdisc. And this is a Laserdisc from 1996 from Elite home entertainment, and here's a look with it without the sleeve at the back right here. It shows you the special features and stuff like that, and then it opens up like a record. So it opens up like this, so you get a full color little display right here. I mean, I'm gonna try to see if I can get it in there without glare. So yeah, and of course, if you haven't seen a laser disc, they're huge. Laser discs are basically giant record size DVDs. So that's what the laser disc look like. And there you get to see the reflection of my computer in there because they're very reflective. So yeah, so that's my Nightmare on Elm Street. All the formats of the film that I own. I love, like I said, I'd love to get it on beta, and maybe one day down the road I might pick up the media home entertainment release sometime. But yeah, big fan of the movie, huge fan of the film. So yeah, so just excuse me while I put this back in here. Just slipping the Laserdisc back in its slip case, which is for some reason taking way too long. Excuse me. I didn't want it to take that long. Anyway, so there you go. All right. Now we go into a little bit of the backstory on the film. The development of the movie is interesting. Wes wanted to do another horror film. He wanted to do something unique, though. He wanted to do his own thing, and he had enough money to do something bigger, something that wasn't just a bunch of crazy people attacking people like Hills Have Eyes or Last House on the Left. He wanted to do something that he thought was going to be really ingenious. And so he was doing some research for things, and he ended up, he was inspired by the series of newspaper articles that were printed in the LA Times in the 1970s, and a group of Khmer refugees who, after fleeing to the United States from the results of the American bombing in Cambodia, were suffering from disturbing nightmares, after which they refused to sleep. And some of the men died in their sleep soon after, and medical authorities called the phenomenon Asian death syndrome. The condition itself afflicted only men between the ages of 19 and 57, and is believed to be the sudden unexplained death syndrome, or Brugada syndrome, or both. And the 1970s pop song Dreamweaver by Gary Wright seals the story for Craven, giving him not only an artistic setting to jump off from, but a synthesizer riff from the Elm Street soundtrack as well. That's interesting. And then Craven has also stated that he drew some inspiration for the film from Eastern religions. There's these Eastern religions that I forgot that it was a very particular part of religion that I cannot remember. I just saw the documentary too that talked about the Eastern religion, but it was an Eastern religion where they practiced the idea of using dreams as if they're waking reality. So they train their children at a young age to be able to learn how to control and use their dreams for useful purposes. So the dreams aren't just dreams; they're more than that. And Wes, this is a quote from Wes Craven talking about the film's creation. He talks about these series of articles, these small articles about men from Southeast Asia who were from immigrant families and died in the middle of nightmares. And the paper never correlated them, and they never said, hey, we've had another story like this. And so he decided that would be a great story for a film. And it is. It is a great story. It's something that even you can't even believe is real now. You're like, really? These people died and then Wes was talking about some more in depth on one of the documentaries on the Blu-ray, which is also on the Infinity Film DVD, by the way, if you have that. And It's talking about how the young man was all like screaming and yelling, and then he was dead. He was screaming and yelling in the middle of the night, and then he's dead. You're like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And then you have the whole thing where I think like one of his family members is warning him, "Don't fall asleep. Don't whatever you do, don't fall asleep. There's something's like after us. Something is trying to kill us in our sleep." And you're just like, wow, like that's a really great idea. And it's a testament to Wes's intelligence and his ability to, and the fact that he does a lot of research. He did a lot of research he does a lot of research for a lot of his films. He did that for Hills of Eyes and discovered about the family, the real life family who were cannibals, and so he does a lot of that sort of stuff when it comes to his films, and it definitely does pay off, especially in this instance, which I got to be honest, I think A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of, if not his finest works in terms of screenplay wise. And other sources also attribute the inspiration for the film to be a 1968 student film project made by students of Craven's at Clarkson University. The student film parodied contemporary horror films and was filmed along Elm Street in Potsdam, New York. And the town in the film was named Madstop, Potsdam spelled backwards. And the film's villain, Freddy Krueger, or as the credits say, Fred Krueger, draws heavily from Craven's early life. One night, a young Craven saw an elderly man walking on the side path outside the window of his home. The man stopped to glance at a startled Craven, just kept this glance on his face for an uncomfortable amount of time, and then walked off. And this served as an inspiration for Krueger. Initially, Fred Krueger was intended to be a child molester, but Craven eventually decided to characterize him as a child murderer to avoid being accused of exploiting a spate of highly publicized child molestation cases that occurred in California around the time of the production of the film. And by Craven's account, his own adolescent experiences led to the naming of Freddy Krueger. He had been bullied at school by a child named Fred Krueger and named his villain accordingly. Now, I'm getting this from Wikipedia, and there's sort of conflicting stories when it comes with that. And in the documentary and the Blu-ray, Wes says that he got the idea of a bully whose name was Fred that bullied him as a kid, but he didn't mention that his last name was Krueger. He said Krueger was more of an inspiration from some sort of like a German name that he thought sounded really uh, evil, so to speak. The kind of like the Nazi sort of, maybe a name that like a Nazi commander might have or something like that. So he was and he was also inspired by Last House on the Left, with the villain's name shortened to Krug, and so he also tied that in with Krueger. And the colored sweater that he chose for his villain was actually he was not. Somebody says it was based on Plastic Man, the DC Comics character, but Craven chose to make Krueger's sweater red and green after reading an article in the Scientific American in 1982 that said the two most clashing colors of the human retina were the combination of red and green. And then Craven strove to make Krueger different from the other horror film villains of his era. He said a lot of killers were wearing masks. You had Leatherface, Michael Myers, Jason. I wanted my villain to have a mask, but be able to talk and taunt and threaten. So I thought of him being burned and scarred. So that could be his mask, which is another ingenious idea by Wes. And then he also felt that the killer should use something other than a knife, which is too common. So he thought, how about a glove with steak knives? And so he gave the idea to his special effects guy, Jim Doyle, and he wrote up some sketches and some designs, and he decided, well, and Wes wanted to do this too. He decided, I like the idea of the finger knives, but I want it to look like it was something that you could build out of parts found in a boiler room. So Jim Doyle put it together, and then he had a bunch of different models. You had the hero glove, which was used only whenever anything needs to be cut, and another was a stunt glove, less likely to cause injury. But they didn't just use the hero glove only whenever anything needs to be cut, because there were times I forgot, and Roberts has the glove with the real sharp knives, and he's doing scenes with Heather Langenkamp. It's just like, is this the sharp glove, or is this the one that's like the plastic one? I want to know. Oh, it's the sharp one. Action! I mean, it was just that kind of craziness. And so yeah, I just thought that was working with Heather Langenkamp with the freaking real sharp gloves. Um, and when Robert first tried it, he ended up cutting his wrists, because when you close the glove like this, the blades cut your wrist. So, and anyone who tried out the glove, excuse me, experienced that. So they kept like closing their hands and they cut their wrists, and then they have to realize, okay, there's a different way we got to do it. And that's where Robert came up with the way that he uses his hands like this with the claws. And Wes Craven began writing a Nightmare on Elm Street screenplay around 1981 after he had finished production on Swamp Thing. He then pitched it to several studios, but each one of them rejected it for different reasons. So yeah, so this is an example of a film that has an ingenious, great, amazing idea that had never been done before, the way that Wes is presenting it. And so many studios were just like, nope, we don't want to do it. We don't want to take a chance with it. So I thought that was interesting, because it shows that even in the early 80s, when you had visionary filmmakers like Wes Craven and other filmmakers like that, original unique ideas were still hard to come by. Studios were still unwilling to take chances on unique original ideas. So especially one as unique as this, which honestly had never been done before, the way that the film was written. And interestingly enough, the first studio to show interest in the film was Walt Disney Productions. But of course, they wanted Craven to tone down the content to make it suitable for children and preteens, and Craven declined. Thankfully, because if Disney did it, we would not have a franchise. We wouldn't have the Freddy Krueger that we know and love. We wouldn't have the film that we know and love, with the just unbelievably grand grand guignol of gore in this movie. Um, So another early suitor was Paramount Pictures. However, the studios passed on the project due to a Nightmare on Elm Street similarity to Dreamscape, a 1984 film that they were producing at the same time. And Dreamscape is a film that deals with dreams and nightmares. And interestingly enough, there is a scene with David Patrick Kelly where he has like finger knives, but I think that's just a coincidence. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. And then Universal Studios passed, the production company that helped release Deadly Blessing, and Craven, who was in desperate personal financial straits during this period, still has their rejection letter framed on the wall of his office. And finally, the fledgling and independent New Line Cinema Corporation, which had up to that point only distributed films rather than making its own, well, actually they had released one other film. They had made their one film before this, and that was Alone in the Dark, a film that was released in 1981, directed by Jack Shoulder. That's a film I like. I think it's actually a little bit underrated. It was 81 or 82. And that film has Jack Palance and what's his name? Martin Landau and Donald Pleasance in it. That was a really solid film. And but it didn't make a lot of money. So Robert Shea, who is the guy behind New Line, he really liked Wes's idea. He's one of the few people in Hollywood, in one of the few studios that actually really liked the idea and thought it would be a great film. And so he ended up putting so much time and effort to getting financing and funding, and he thought he had got money from Smart Egg Pictures. And about 2 weeks before they're about to start production, Smart Egg pulled out. So now they don't have any money, and then it was like, oh man, and then it was like, well, this movie's not going to get made. But Robert was so gung-ho about it, thankfully. And I gotta give huge kudos and big thanks and a big thank you, of course, to Robert Shea for ending up fighting for A Nightmare on Elm Street. And also for the other people in the crew. Well, there was one member in the crew when they started production and they didn't have the money from Smart Egg, but they needed to start pre-production or start production, and he ended up paying eight thousand or eight to $9,000 off on his credit card to pay the cast and crew so they could start production, so they could start building the sets and building all this other stuff. And so I was like, wow, like that shows a lot of determination to get this film made. And thankfully, it all paid off. And so yeah, and of course, Smart Eye didn't come back until later, and they needed more money. So Robert ended up going to Media Home Entertainment. So he went up to Media Home Entertainment, the producer over there, where you have multiple different producer credits. So that's why you have production companies Media Home Entertainment and Smart Egg Pictures, as well as New Line Cinema, because he contacted this guy from Media Home Entertainment and then managed to convince him to give him some money up front, and under the clause that if the film got in any sort of trouble, that this head of media would then take over the film production. Thankfully, that's not what happened, but it was just an interesting sort of deal. And then Robert was able to convince Smart Egg to fund the last half of the film. And of course, then the film became a huge hit, and it ended up becoming the support beam, so to speak, for the house that for the House of New Line, which of course people like to call the house that Freddy built, which in a way is there's a lot of truth to that. And with the casting, originally actor David Warner was actually originally slated to play Freddy. You might remember David Warner from Tron. He played the bad guy in Tron. He was also in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 as the Doctor and the scientist guy. Which I know I can't remember his name right now, but it's just not coming to me at the moment. And he was also in Star Trek 5. I think he played one of the hostages. He played a Klingon in Star Trek 6. So David Warner's been in a lot of things. And makeup tests were actually done. Of course, he was in The Omen as the guy who got decapitated. So that's what a lot of people remember him from. So makeup tests are actually done, but then he had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts. I don't know exactly what conflicts they were. And replacing them was difficult at first, said Wes. He said he couldn't find an actor to play Freddy Krueger with the sense of ferocity that he was seeking. And he said everyone was too quiet and too compassionate towards children. Then Robert Englund auditioned. He wasn't as tall as I'd hoped. He had baby fat on his face, but he impressed me with his willingness to go to the dark places in his mind. He says that Robert understood Freddy. And he also relished the role and had fun with it. And to get that understanding, Englund had darkened his lower eyelids with cigarette ash on his way to the audition and slicked his hair black. He says, I looked strange. I sat there and listened to Wes talk. He was tall and preppy and erudite. And I posed a bit like Klaus Kinski, and that was the audition, he said later. And then he took the part because it's the only project that fit in his schedule during the hiatus between V, the miniseries, and the series. And Robert talks about how he had a lot of inspiration from Klaus Kinski's role as Nosferatu in the Nosferatu remake in 1979, directed by Werner Herzog. He talked about how he loved Klaus's performance and how he incorporated a lot of Klaus's acting into his performance as Freddy. And he also ended up, when he put on the makeup for the first time, he was kind of freaked out. He thought he was afraid that if he moved too much, pieces would fall off, but then he realized that it was moving well and things weren't falling off, so he was able to be more expressive with his face. But he ended up, there were still some things he wasn't able to do, so he ended up deciding to make his eyes, which he has these beady little eyes, and they dart back and forth, and he'd end up making that work for Freddy. And so I thought that was It was nice to hear then, how Robert approached the character. And Craven claimed he wanted someone very non-Hollywood for the role of Nancy. He also wanted somebody that looked like they were beautiful, but they looked like they were smart and they were intelligent. And Heather Langenkamp fit this role, fit this bill. And Langenkamp, before becoming an actress, she worked as a newspaper copy girl, and she saw an advertisement for extras needed on The Outsiders earlier that year, which was being shot in Tulsa. She did not get the part, but encouraged her to take time off from her studies at Stanford and continue acting. And eventually she landed the role of Nancy Thompson after an open audition, beating out more than 200 actresses, including Demi Moore, Courtney Cox, Tracy Gold, and Jennifer Grey. And Langenkamp then returned as Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and then of course played herself in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Johnny Depp at the time was also another unknown when he was cast, and he initially went to accompany a friend, Jackie Earle Haley, who would go on to play Freddy in the 2010 remake, so he could audition, and yet he eventually got the part of Glenn. Well, originally he wasn't the first choice. There's some other guy that Wes really liked, but I think it was somebody who was on that Wes knew, or a younger girl, or somebody that he knew, or somebody the crew knew, and she saw the headshot of Johnny Depp. It was like, no, not that guy, Johnny Depp. He's hot. He's such a dreamboat. So it was like, okay, we'll go with Johnny Depp. And Glenn Lance's epic death in the movie is paid homage by a flashback in Freddy vs. Jason, and Depp gets his own nod in a cameo in Freddy's Dead. The final nightmare is a guy on TV. And it was Craven's daughters, that's who it was, who picked Depp's headshot from the set he showed them. He's so dreamy. And then other actors that were possible choices for Depp's character Glenn were Charlie Sheen, who wanted too much money, so they didn't go with him. John Cusack, Brad Pitt, Kiefer Sutherland, Nicolas Cage, excuse me while I laugh, Nicolas Cage and C. Thomas Howell were all considered. The role eventually went to Johnny Depp. And when they started filming, according to Shea, all the film's original investors, like I was saying, backed out at one point during pre-production. The original budget was $700,000 and ended up at $1.1 million, which when you look at the amount of money this movie cost to make, which is about $1.1 million or $1.8 million, which it says on Wikipedia, and you see what's on the screen, which this film had about 80 different special effects shots. It's an unbelievably amazing accomplishment that I think is honestly a little bit underrated in that regard. I know this film is not underrated at all. It's considered one of the best horror films of all time. But when it comes to how it was able to do so much with so little, that's something that I think is a little bit underrated. And yeah, half the funding came from a Yugoslavian guy who had a girlfriend he wanted in movies. And so principal photography of the film began in June 1984 and it wrapped in July. The fictional address of the house that appears in the film is 1428 Elm Street in Springwood, Ohio. The actual house is a private home located in Los Angeles, California on 1428 North Genesee Avenue. And during production, over 500 gallons of fake blood were used for the special effects production. So much that the actress who played Tina Gray, Amanda Wyss, she thought that the main theme of the movie was just as bloody. It's just, there's a lot of blood. It's all about the blood. Which I don't blame her, especially in the sequence that she was in. And all the sequences that she was in, and I don't blame her for thinking it's just blood. And for the famous blood geyser sequence, the filmmakers used the same revolving set that was used for Tina's death. And that was an idea that I think Wes and the crew came up with inspired by, of all things, I think it was Singing in the Rain, or it was one of those Fred Astaire musicals where he's dancing on the ceiling, and they did that with a revolving room. So they thought, can we do that? Do we have the budget? Can we build a revolving room so we could do that scene where Tina's being dragged up the ceiling? And they ended up, yeah, we can do it. So they did it, and it looks great. And so they used the same room for the blood geyser sequence, and they put the set so that it was upside down, And then they attached the camera so that it looked like the room was right side up. And then they poured gallons of red water into the room. And then they put a little bit of extra, thickener into it. Because the normal film blood would not make the right effect for the geyser. And so during the filming of the scene, the blood poured in an unexpected way, causing the rotating room to spin. And so much of the blood spilled out of the bedroom window, covering Craven and Langenkamp. And then the scene where Nancy is attacked by Kruger in a bathtub, that was accomplished with a special bottomless tub. And the tub was put in a bathroom set that was built over a swimming pool. And during the underwater sequence, Langenkamp was replaced with a stunt woman. And then in the whole scene the infamous scene where Freddy's glove comes out in between your legs, that wasn't Robert Englund. That was the guy who helped build the glove, actually, the special effects guy, Jim Doyle. And he would hold his breath, go under the water, wait for a cue from Wes, and then he'd take his claw out, and make sure it's in the right position and everything like that. So Jim Doyle was a real trooper. And then the whole thing, the melting staircase scene, that was Robert Shaye's idea. It was created using pancake mix. And this is a scene that almost wasn't shot because this is near the end of the shooting, and the studios and the producers, they're all like, we need to get this finished. You're over schedule. We need to get this done. We don't have enough money for this. And even Robert Shaye's like, come on, shoot it, Wes, shoot it. And Wes is like, oh, or just cut it out. We don't have time for this. And then Wes is like, well, why don't you shoot it, Bob? It's your idea. And so Robert Shaye actually shot that sequence where Nancy's going up the stairs and her feet get stuck in the stairs. Jsu Garcia, who's credited as Rod under the name Nick Corey, says the production was difficult for him. He had recently come off a period of homelessness, and he was still dealing with the depression from that by snorting heroin in the bathroom between takes. In 2014, he revealed that he was high on drugs during the scene between him and Langenkamp in his jail cell. His eyes were watery and they weren't focused, Langenkamp said. I thought, wow, he's giving the best performance of his life. So he was under the influence. Still did a good job performance-wise. And Wes casted him because he saw a guy that looked tough but also was able to emote. And he liked that. He was tough, but he was also able to effectively display emotion. And so he really enjoyed that. Amanda Wyss, she was just graduated from acting school, and they got her because she fit the look that Wes was looking for, sort of Janet Leigh sort of look. And she talks about how the film was very uncomfortable. Especially doing the scene where she's dragged up the wall and bleeding and all of that. And she talked about when she first walked into the revolving set, she just automatically got this vertigo. It's very uneasy. And then she talks about this body bag scene. She hated that because it's like, you're not supposed to be in body bags. And then all these, these snakes and stuff. And it was awful. But I would agree. It probably was pretty awful. But it was a very effective sequence regardless. Thanks for putting up with all of that, Amanda. Wes Craven originally planned for the film to have a more evocative ending. Nancy then kills Kruger by ceasing to believe in him and then awakens to discover that everything happened in the film was an elongated nightmare. However, New Line reader Robert Shaye demanded a twist ending in which Kruger disappears and the film all appears to have been a dream, only for the audience to discover that they are watching a dream within a dream within a dream, where Fred reappears as a car kidnaps Nancy and her friends, followed by Fred reaching through a window on the front door to pull Nancy's mother inside. Which that sequence was the last sequence that was shot for the film. The scene where Freddy's arm breaks through the window and pulls Ronnie Blakley, or her inflatable Ronnie, through the window. And both a happy ending and a twist ending were filmed, but the final film used a twist ending. As a result, Craven, who never wanted the film to be a franchise, dropped out of working on the first sequel, Freddy's Revenge. Production then wrapped in July and was rushed to get it ready for its November release. The film then came out, and the film almost didn't even come out in theaters because they didn't have enough money to pay the guys who had the film cells. They didn't have money to pay the guys to finish the film cells, so they didn't have enough money to pay the film guys. So Somehow, though, Robert Shaye ended up finding enough money and paid him, and that's how Nightmare on Elm Street was able to be released in theaters. That's how I'm able to own it on multiple different formats. That's how the movie was released. It was an extreme undertaking. It was tough. It was hard to do. It was hard to even get it made from the beginning. And then even when it was finished, it took even more money just to get it in theaters. And this sounds like a disaster. In a lot of ways, you think, wow, this sounds like a disaster. And the film made back its budget in the opening weekend. And then I think it was like 4 million in the opening weekend alone, which is a really big number for 1984. And then it made it was $25 million gross on a $1.8 million budget. So it was definitely a hit, and critics liked it, and it's a film that stood the test of time. It's a very timeless classic horror film, and but yeah, I just wanted to a little bit of that, backstory, so to speak. That was pretty interesting stuff. Um, but anyway, let's get into the actual review, shall we? I first saw this film. I was on Bravo when they were like, it was a Halloween marathon. I was over visiting my dad, and I think I definitely was in my teens. And it took me a while to see horror films, folks, because my mom didn't want me to watch them until I was a certain age, which I understand, but that's what's made me obsessed with the genre. So I gotta thank her for that. But I remember seeing the scene with Tina in the body bag. I remember flipping through channels and I found Bravo, and then I saw the scene with the body bag. I was like, what the hell is this? And I saw, of course, the info. It was like Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm like, oh, Nightmare on Elm Street. I heard so much about this movie. And then I watched that, and then there were so many commercials that I occasionally flipped to other channels, and then like I'd miss part of it. Then I'd flip back because I didn't want to deal with the commercials. But I saw a good amount of the film on Bravo. And so I saw the body bag scene, and then I remember the ending. I remember the boiler room sequence, and then I remember the ending where Freddy's on fire, hovering over Ronnie Blakley, and then Heather Langenkamp hits him in the back with the chair. So I remember that, but I didn't really watch the film all the way through until I think a couple years later, when I went to the public library and they had like all the Nightmare on Elm Street films there for rent, rent it from the library, and I rented the DVDs. And this was a time when I was at home alone, which is a rare instance at this time because I was living with my grandmother and my mother in Portland, and so they went on a vacation somewhere, and I was home alone. The only people really there were not necessarily home alone, because there were people at the house, but they weren't my parents. There was guys who were here to work on the furnaces and stuff like that. I think they were also working on putting new doors in the to the outside. They were putting new doors in to go outside of my grandmother's garden, and I had all this time. And the DVDs they're overdue, and I'm like, I gotta turn them in, but I haven't watched them yet. So I remember just doing a whole marathon of Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and that's when I first watched the Nightmare on Elm Street films all the way through, and of course including the first one, which I really loved the first time around. I was like, wow, this is great. And then flash forward more than a few years later, I've watched the film multiple more times since. And every time it still holds up great. This is a movie I can watch over and over and over again, and I do not get tired of it. It's a film that even the ending, which for the most part, yeah, it's a twist ending, but it's what sets it up for the sequels for the franchise. Um, and so I'm okay with it. The ending doesn't really bother me that much. In fact, actually like the even alternate cut where you actually show Freddy driving the car, which there was a shot of that. And that was originally what Robert Shaye wanted to do, but Wes didn't like it, so he went with the car thing. And I like the concept of having the car and also having Freddy driving it. And I like that. So I didn't mind that at all. I saw the alternate ending with Freddy driving the car, and I was like, we should just have that back in the film. I'm fine with Freddy still staying alive. It's a very iconic, memorable villain. Um, so yeah, and I really love the film for a lot of other reasons. I love it for the kills, for the gore. I mean, I love this franchise for their kills. This franchise has some of the most imaginative, ingenious kills out of any slasher franchise. Um, Glenn's death, just fountain of blood. The death scene, Tina's death is still one of the most harrowing and intense death scenes I've seen on a film. Like I've seen the scene multiple times. I know what's going to happen, but it's so heart-wrenching and tragic, and you're just helpless as you watch this poor young woman, this young girl, just get dragged up the ceiling, screaming the top of her lungs, getting cut open and bleeding everywhere and screaming for help, and no one could help her. And then she dies, and then it's just like, damn, that's brutal. Um, Nick Garcia's death that's okay. Jsu Garcia's death is all right. Nick Corey. It's there, but it's nowhere near as imaginative or as memorable as Tina's or Glenn's death. Um, so yeah, it doesn't have a huge body count, but it doesn't need to, because the concept and the idea behind it and the story is so engaging that it doesn't need that. And it has an excellent cast. Heather Langenkamp, one of the best final girls I've ever seen in a horror film. I love her performance. She's not only hot and sexy, but she also can hold her own and do it believably. She's very intelligent, very smart, and very strong. And I really love that about her character. I love her performance. It's one of the best performances by an actress, in my opinion, in a horror film. Really love Heather Langenkamp, and definitely do adore her in this movie. She's a big reason why the film holds up so well. Big reason why I love the film so much is because of Heather Langenkamp. I also like the other supporting cast. I mean, it's not great to see John Saxon. I mean, I love John Saxon. John Saxon's a great actor. I loved him in Black Christmas. He's in fine form here as well as Lieutenant Don Thompson, Nancy's dad. Johnny Depp does a solid job as Glenn. Plays a character that's completely opposite to the kind of characters that he plays now. Character is very white bread, very wouldn't hurt a fly, very normal guy, which is the complete opposite of who he really is. He still did a good job playing that role. Ronnie Blakley does a good job as Marge Thompson. I like how they show that this is a middle class where the middle class is sort of deteriorating. Middle class is falling apart. You see that she's drinking heavily, and dad's not home very often because he's too busy doing cop work, and so the film does show a little bit of the middle class deteriorating, which is something a lot of films at that time didn't really show. The film also, of course, takes on tropes that other horror films before it have done, with the whole idea of innocence lost, and before you're able to become an adult, you end up getting killed before you end up it's the adolescence sort of thing. This coming of age where you're the archetypical teenager, and then all this stuff happens, and then it's like the traumatic experiences of adolescence. So it's like the sexuality is Kruger, and you're uncomfortable, and all this sort of stuff. Where adolescence is uncomfortable, growing up isn't necessarily something you want to do, and Freddy is the person who is there to either, he's gonna strike you down before you can learn to end up becoming the person that you ultimately will end up being as an adult. Um, so and Freddy is just a very nightmarish character. It's a great concept, and and then just the idea of the film being a movie that takes place and concentrates on nightmares and dreams is just something that was very unique at the time. I mean, you had Dreamscape and things like that, but they didn't approach it nearly the same as Nightmare on Elm Street did, where it blurred the line between reality and fantasy in a way that made it really hard to tell which sequence was a dream and which wasn't. And I really like that about the film. It envelops you, and it sucks you in. I mean, the locations are great. The boiler room, which is no longer around, it's been closed down. It was some boiler room down in the basement of some gym, and they found out later it was closed down. The producers, the production, the guys found out later that the boiler room was closed down because of asbestos. So they were breathing in asbestos for a week while they were shooting down there. So I thought that was pretty crazy. And going back to the cast, I mean, Amanda Wyss as Tina, I liked her. Nick Corey's Rod. Um, yeah, Lynn Shay plays the teacher. She would go on to be in like a ton of other horror films, especially horror films lately. And and I would be remiss, of course. I was saving the best for last. Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. He just became Fred Krueger. He became this character. He just relished in this role, and it just shows. You just have this energy and this vitality behind this character that's just infectious. You can see why this character ended up becoming a franchise of its own, because this character is just so striking and so memorable. Scary. Scary as in this movie. Creepy as all hell in this film. Of course, later you go on to have more, be a little bit more humorous. But it's not like he didn't have any sense of humor in this. The whole scene where he's has Tina's face on saying, "Help me! Help me! Help me! Save me from Freddy!" Yeah, that kind of thing. So that was that kind of there's a little hints at what Freddy would end up becoming in later films. So it's not like the humor was something that was completely out of left field. It was kind of already there in the film regardless. And I loved how Robert ended up using some emotions that he had on the set for Freddy. In particular, he he hated the fact that these young kids were getting makeup on, and they didn't really need it. And he was in the makeup chair for 4 hours, and he's an older guy, and so he was envious of their youth and their vitality. And so he channeled that into his performance as Freddy. So whenever he needed to be angry and you go after characters, he would try to kill their innocence, which taps into a lot of the concepts and sort of the themes of the film. I also really like the fact that the story showed the sequences where they take Nancy to a dream specialist and they try to explain it scientifically, and then it's not explainable either that way. I like that, and I really love the stuff of taking things out of the dream and bringing them into reality, like Freddy's hat, and then that enables her to be able to bring Freddy out of the dream world into the real world. And of course, I love her resourcefulness, where she sets up traps, Home Alone style, to stop Freddy. And then there's just subtle things that I really love about this film. Like there's this one shot near the end where Nancy's in the boiler room, and you see Freddy's glove in the corner of the screen like this, and then it just moves, and then I just love that because I love that type of peripheral vision type scares. That's something that I've always loved. That stuff always gets me. And like every scene with Freddy in the dream sequences are still scenes that make me squirm and make me they're very they induce a lot of tension in me. I'm very tense and jumpy. And it's not like there's a lot of jump scares. It's just this film scares me more than other movies do with this imagery. It's just so nightmarish and just ingenious, wildly inventive, and in all these different ways. I really love the sequence with the long arms in the alleyway. Freddy's long arms, and that's just a sequence that they just did really simply. They just had like long arms and then they moved them with fishing line. From like one guy was on a roof over one guy was two guys were on opposite roofs next to the arms, and then they just put fishing line and just moved the arms around. It wasn't anything that complex. And I like how Wes puts it. He says we did a lot of practical effects in this movie, as we that because we only had so much money to work with. And he said, he put it really eloquently. He said, it wasn't just practical effects are just another word for physical effects. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's it. It's physical effects. That's really what I think a lot of films nowadays are missing, is these physical effects, effects that are tangible, effects that you can reach into the screen and actually physically touch. If it was possible, you could actually touch those effects. And sequences like when Freddy rips his face off, shows a skull, that was just something that David Miller did with a puppet, and they did it in one take. The makeup, David Miller did an excellent job with the makeup effects on Freddy in this film. It is definitely the most creepy, slimy looking Freddy makeup there is, really. For later down the road, it would get more and more lighter or easier to put on for a Robert, which makes sense. But the first makeup is always the one that always just makes me go, ugh, ugh. And then and Robert couldn't take the makeup off most of the time, so he's there eating lunch with all these other people like Ronnie Blakley and company, and he's Freddy. Here he is, Freddy, with his burn makeup, eating lunch. And Robert was talking about fun stories when he first got the claws and started experimenting with them, and he like used the claws to grab marshmallows and put jelly on them and play pranks on people on the set. This is definitely a role that Robert was born to play, because he took the right approach to the character. He just went all out with it, and it was a hard role to do and a hard role to pull off, and it was disturbing, it was twisted, but he went all out with it, and with the very unique personality that he has, it just created a very amazing performance that just literally lights the screen on fire every time he's in a sequence. And speaking of fire, there was speaking of physical effects, the guy who does the full body burn at the end, like even the crew were like, thinking this guy's insane. Like he gets lit on fire, and then he runs up the stairs, and falls down the stairs, which had never been done before. And this is like the longest body burn at the time. And then like he gets up again, and then tries to go up the stairs again, and it's like, and then finally they put him out, and then the first word he says is like, "Hey, how'd it look? Did I do a good job?" And it was just like, that was funny. It's like, this guy's been lit on fire forever, and he's just like, yeah, shucks, whatever. It's just fire. But yeah, I just love that about the fact that this movie did as much physical effects as it could. And it really shows on the screen. And I know people say, oh, the sequence with Ronnie Blakley getting taken through the window, so fake. I watched it again on Blu-ray. I didn't even notice it was an inflatable dummy. I did not. The sequence was so short, I didn't notice it. I don't think I ever noticed it most of the time. The only time I ever noticed it is if I paused the film and then, oh, okay, all right, that's a dummy. But it was so short that it just went by my eyes real quick, and then I didn't register that it was a dummy, that it was one of the worst special effects I've ever seen. And they did it all in one take. And actually, it was pretty clever, the idea of using an inflatable dummy to pull through the window, because I don't even know how they were going to do it with anything else. Looks better than CGI. At least it's something physical. So, yeah, I didn't really have a problem with that at all, really. And that doesn't bother me at all, to be honest. So, yeah, I mean, just great story, great cast. I just the concepts behind it are really ingenious. The whole idea of somebody killing you in your dreams is just great. It's something that we can all relate to. We can all relate to nightmares, and don't fall asleep. And the whole I also love of course, there's great lines of dialogue. I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. And then this scene, which I really like, this is after we see Freddy with Tina with the long arms. And she's like, please, God, no. This is God. I thought that was really kind of ballsy. The very ballsy line of dialogue. But it works so well. Because in the dream world, in that realm, Freddy is God. So I thought that was actually really poignant. It was really good. I always remember that sequence. I always remember that line. It's always this line in a sequence that's always stuck with me. And I would be completely remiss if I did not mention the excellent score by Charles Bernstein. This score, Charles Bernstein put up his own money to do the score, and he decided to compose it within the comfort of his own home in order to save costs, and created just an amazing score. And he's the one that came up with the Freddy, the lullaby. Uh, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. He came up with that one, and then he ended up spinning off a theme off of that, where you have the down, 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 dun, 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 dun. So he spun off the lullaby into its own theme. And then he does another good job with the scare. With it, whenever there's a scare, I like the little stings that he uses for the music, and then I like the electronic score. I mean, I just the score that plays when Heather Langenkamp setting up the traps is just an excellent score. Great score, fantastic score. One of the best scores I can think of for a horror film. Cinematography by Jacques Hatkin is great. It is phenomenal. And the sequences in the boiler room are darkly beautiful. They're really well shot. The editing is really well done by Patrick McMahon and Rick Shane. And yeah, and the film even had a great poster. I mean, this is a great movie, period. This is a classic. I mean, I know this is a long review. I love this movie, and I wanted to go as in depth as I possibly could because I love A Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's a film that, to me, until it will stand the test of time until the end of time. I look at it as the first film that Wes did that finally really showed that, wow, we really have something here with Wes. I mean, I like things like Deadly Blessing, and I liked Hills of Eyes, but this is the film where you're like, this guy's really onto something. Like, this guy really knows how to set up his films. He's a great writer. This guy is maybe the new uh, horror guy. He's the new John Carpenter, or he's the next big thing. And this is the first film that really showed that to me. That with the first screenplay that really just stands out as something that's just unlike anything you've ever seen before or since. So, and that's why this film still holds up great to this day to me. I don't think it's that dated because it doesn't really rely a lot upon anything from the actual decade. It just, the story is still very memorable and relevant now, and the characters are still great. The story's still great. The direction is still great. Wes still does a great job putting this story together and bringing it to the screen. And it's still a story that to this day, I mean, there's other films that try to imitate it and be like A Nightmare on Elm Street, but you're not going to top it. You're not going to top the original. You're not going to top the one that did it first, which is why I don't know why it was remade in the first place. I don't know why they're talking about remaking it again, because you're not going to get that feeling that you get when you watch A Nightmare on Elm Street. And the feeling I'm talking about is this feeling of the first time, of you're watching a film that has such a unique concept that had never been done in the way that the film presented it before. Now it's been remade, and if they're going to remake it again, it's just going to be the same thing, different movie. And this is the one rare instance where it was something completely different, something completely new, something completely original. And it took these old horror tropes and put a new spin on them and did something unique with it. And created a film that not only had these themes of coming of age and these themes of the deterioration of the middle class and all these other things that you can, use for your film theory or, film studies class, but it also is a film that's immensely entertaining, with a great cast, with likable characters, A film that got you emotionally invested in the film, because so whenever people are dying right and left and Freddy's killing them, you're like, no, I don't want this to happen, don't. And great performances. And a film that, for good reason, it still stands the test of time. A film that still people consider one of the best films of its genre, for good reason, because it is. It was back then, and it still is now. So the idea of remaking it not only once but twice doesn't make any sense to me, because you're not going to recapture what A Nightmare on Elm Street did. Nightmare on Elm Street was like lightning striking. You're not gonna strike lightning. It's not gonna strike twice again. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna have the same impact either. When this film hit, it was like a huge lightning strike. It was one that just seared through the entire genre, seared through basically seared through the entire year, and made a mark. A remake, especially a second remake, isn't gonna leave a mark. It's not going to leave anything. Maybe it'll leave some skid marks, but that's about it. But yeah, that's why I don't support the idea of another remake of this film, because this is a movie that's still unique and inventive and ingenious to this day. It did things and went places that no other film had tried before. And if a film tries to do it again with the same title, it's just the same thing that we already saw, and we already saw done better in this movie. Kind of pointless to me. But that's just me personally. Anyway, I really don't know what else to say about A Nightmare on Elm Street, except if I was going to rate it out of 5 stars, I would give the movie 5. The ending doesn't bother me that much. In fact, I could have had the alternate ending with Freddy driving the car. It doesn't bother me that much. It's a twist ending that does not bug me. It doesn't. I mean, things like Intruder or other twist endings in other films, like Deadly Blessing, kind of bug me. But this doesn't bug me at all, because I know what it's leading up to. And it's leading up to an excellent, fun, entertaining franchise, which you'll hear more about this October. But anyway, thank you for watching my long, in-depth review and retrospective of A Nightmare on Elm Street, one of my all-time favorite films. And I will see you guys later. See ya.